Let's go back to June 19th, 2020. We're in a town called Sathankulam in Tamil Nadu, India. It's just past 8 p.m., literally 2 minutes after the COVID lockdown curfew started. And we see a 59-year-old man named Jayaraj just standing outside his shop. It's a moment that should have been completely ordinary. But he had no idea that these were his last moments of freedom, or that his life was about to collide with an absolutely horrifying display of police brutality.
So this was the official story. A simple, almost boring explanation for why two grown men would end up with catastrophic injuries. The police report claimed that Jayaraj and his son, Bennix, they resisted arrest, they argued, and then, get this, they just fell down on their own, causing all this internal damage. This one sentence, this would become the very foundation of a massive cover-up.
And that right there is the question at the very heart of this explainer. Because while the official report tried to paint a picture of a routine arrest that just got a little out of hand, the truth was something so much darker. A truth that honestly would have been buried forever if not for the incredible courage of two people from inside the system itself. I mean, just look at this timeline. Look how fast everything escalated. At 8:03, the police talk to Jayaraj and actually walk away. But then 2 minutes later, they call him back. An argument starts, and his son, 31-year-old Bennix, comes over to see what's going on. Just 1 minute after that, the police are forcibly bundling his dad into their Jeep. And like any son would do, Bennix immediately races after them to the police station.
Okay, so to justify what they'd just done, the police needed a story, and they needed it on paper. So they filed what's called a First Information Report, or an FIR, and they basically created this false narrative out of thin air. It claimed the men were aggressive, that they fought back, and that all their injuries were self-inflicted. This document wasn't just a report, it was a premeditated lie to excuse what was about to happen next.
When Bennix got to the station, he saw his father being savagely beaten by a sub-inspector. And when he tried to intervene, begging them to just stop, they slammed the station's main door shut. And just like that, he was trapped inside too. What happened next wasn't an interrogation. It was a calculated, sadistic assault that went on for almost 7 hours. The violence was just methodical. The men were stripped of their clothes, a tactic designed not just for physical pain, but for total humiliation. They were beaten over and over again with lathis, which are these heavy police-issue wooden batons. And Inspector Sridhar, the man in charge, he wasn't just watching, he was directing this whole nightmare, telling his officers to be more violent. And in a final, disgusting act of cruelty, Bennix, bleeding everywhere, was forced to use his own T-shirt to wipe his own blood off the station floor. And if you want to understand the chilling mindset here, listen to this. When the beating would pause for a moment and the screaming died down, Inspector Sridhar would taunt his officers, saying things like, "What happened? Why have the screams stopped?" This wasn't a loss of control. To them, this was entertainment. At one point, he even suggested a new round of torture, ordering his men to make Jayaraj and Bennix lie on a table so they could be beaten in a new way. But here's the thing. This horror wasn't just the work of a few rogue cops. For a tragedy like this to unfold, an entire system of checks and balances had to completely and utterly fail. At every single point where someone could have and should have stepped in, they just looked the other way. First, the doctor. Jayaraj and Bennix were taken to a government hospital. Their clothes had reportedly been changed 6 times because they couldn't stop bleeding. They couldn't even stand on their own. And yet, a doctor signed a medical fitness certificate, officially saying they were fine. Next, the magistrate. The law says he had to visually inspect the accused. Instead, he cited COVID rules, waved from his balcony, and sent them to jail without asking a single question. And finally, the jail. They were sent 100 kilometers away, and for 2 whole days, as their conditions got worse and worse, they received no medical help at all. The end came so fast. On the evening of June 22nd, 2 full days after the assault, Bennix complained of terrible chest pain. By the time he was finally taken to the hospital, it was too late. He was pronounced dead at 9 p.m. from what doctors called blunt force trauma and massive internal bleeding.
His father, Jayaraj, was admitted later that same night. He died just a few hours later, in the early morning of June 23rd, from a punctured lung.
So, in the face of this absolute darkness, this total systemic failure, the entire chance for justice came down to two people. Two women inside that very police station who saw everything and made the unbelievably brave choice not to stay silent.
I want you to remember these names: Head Constable Revathi and Station Writer Selva Kumari. They were on duty that night. They weren't part of the assault, but they were witnesses. They saw every single moment of that 7-hour ordeal. They heard every scream, they saw every blow, and their memory became a living record of the crime.
The contrast here is just staggering. On one side, you have the accused officers doing everything they can to cover their tracks. I mean, they set the CCTV to auto-delete footage. They hired a private car so they wouldn't get blood in a police vehicle. They even forced a cleaner, who could neither hear nor speak, to wipe blood off the walls. But then, on the other side, you had Revathi and Selva Kumari. Even with her colleagues standing right outside the room trying to intimidate her, Revathi signed a formal statement. They showed investigators the exact spots where the bloodstains were. Their testimony, it was the truth fighting back.
And the courage of these two women, when it was combined with this tidal wave of public anger, it finally started to turn the wheels of justice. What started as a local tragedy was about to explode into a national outrage.
A video by a radio jockey named Suchitra went viral. In it, she just laid out the sheer brutality of the case in plain language. And suddenly, hashtags like #Justice for Jayaraj and Bennix were trending all over the world. People were even comparing it to the George Floyd murder in the US. The online pressure got so intense that the Madras High Court took what's called suo motu cognizance, which basically means it launched its own investigation without even waiting for a formal complaint. And that was a huge turning point. And this right here, this is where testimony became cold, hard proof. The Central Bureau of Investigation, or CBI, took over the case, and Revathi and Selva Kumari's testimony became a roadmap for the forensic team. They said the lathis were bloody. Boom. DNA tests on the batons matched the victims. They pointed to the walls and a table. Yep, bloodstains from those exact spots were also a DNA match. They said a cleaner was forced to wipe the floors, and he confirmed their story. Their words transformed into scientific evidence that completely destroyed the police's lie that the men had just fallen down. So after a long and agonizing legal battle that went on for years, the case finally reached its conclusion. And the verdict that was handed down, well, it would be one for the history books. 9. One of the 10 accused officers died during the trial, but the other 9 police personnel, including Inspector Sridhar, were all found guilty of conspiracy, illegal detention, destroying evidence, and ultimately of murder. On April 6, 2026, the court delivered its final historic sentence. It rejected every single plea for a lighter punishment, and the judge handed down the death penalty to all 9 of the convicted police officers. The way the court defined this crime was so important, the judge called it a rarest of rare case. That's a term in Indian law for the absolute most heinous crimes, for when the community is so shocked that it demands the most severe penalty. This wasn't an interrogation gone wrong, he said. It was an act of pure revenge. In his words were absolutely damning. Where there is power, there is also responsibility. But here, the protectors became the predators. But get this, in a final, chilling twist, as the convicted officers were being let out of the courtroom after being sentenced to death, news cameras actually caught some of them smiling and laughing. No remorse, no fear. It was just this shocking display of arrogance, like they still believed that somehow the system they were a part of would save them.
The court actually made a point to emphasize this in its final judgment. It stated, crystal clear, that the foundation of the entire conviction, the only reason this case didn't just disappear into some dusty file cabinet, was the unwavering and courageous testimony of Head Constable Revathi and Station Writer Selva Kumari. They were the key to everything.
And for the family who had fought so hard for so many years, the verdict finally brought some sense of justice. Jayaraj's wife, Selvarani, and the rest of their family, they had been through an unimaginable loss and this grueling fight for accountability. And finally, the court gave them an answer. You know, this case is a really stark reminder of just how fragile justice can be, but it's also this incredible testament to the power of individual courage. And it leaves us with a really critical question to think about. When the very system that's designed to protect us becomes the predator, what is the true price of speaking the truth, and who will be brave enough to pay it?